We are going to go over the concept of land use planning and some of the tools that make that happen. This includes some of the things from chapter 9 in your textbook, not all of them. We're not going to cover everything in that chapter. And it just kind of is going to give you an overview of zoning. And this presentation also includes a good chunk of information that's not covered in your book. So here we go. So when I'm talking about land use controls, what am I even talking about? What am I even talking about? Okay, so I want you to think of urban planning as about being about decisions on how to use land, making decisions on how to use land. So with this, we're talking about big stuff. We are talking about these huge projects. We're talking about creating land value in the sense of hundreds of millions of dollars. We're talking about activities that shape development, like entire sewer systems, massive bridges, the really, really big projects. So what we're going to go over are what tools do we have to shape urban places? What tools do we have to build our cities? One of those is public capital investments. And the second one is land use controls, and we will go over what each of those mean. Public capital investments. What is this? Okay, this is going to be your things like we're going to build stuff. The big things we're going to build. This is your bridges, your mass transit systems, new subway lines, entire sewer and water systems. We're talking things like airports, universities, lakefronts, as in like riverside developments. We're talking about these like really big projects, or what we're talking about is public capital investments. These are powerful shapers of the pattern of development. These type of projects influence the value of land. They're definitely connected to land value. What you build kind of dictates how valuable the land is going to be, or what you don't build. We're talking about things that are going to be there for decades, so these are really visual decisions that we're making. These aren't just, the stuff you're going to see. It's stuff that's going to be in a community for a long time. So really, you could think of public capital investments means big projects. So how do we pay for these big projects? One is grants. The federal government gives money to the state government. The state government then trickles it down to local governments. So one way is to get some federal funding, some grants. Normal city operations are funded with current revenue. Like the tax revenue this year pays for the police department this year. The mayor's propose a budget. This is kind of like your normal city operations. Are funded with revenue. Now that's different than these public capital investments. There's a separate budget. Governments have a separate capital budget, a CIP, a capital improvement plan. So this isn't like your normal operating revenue. It's the separate capital budget. So the capital expenditures, the money to pay for the big projects, is usually financed with bonds. That's kind of like a loan. Two different kind of bonds are GO bonds, the general obligation bond, that the local government, the local municipality has to repay them over time with interest. Or there's a revenue bond, which is backed by the ability of the project to make money, to make revenue. So that type of bond is like, think of it like a toll road. Like if you build the toll road, it's like you're building the road and you're going to collect tolls to pay for the road. A bond to, for something like that it's a project that you can kind of link that it's going to make money. So those are the type of bonds. I mean, that's how we pay for these big projects. A lot of money involved here. So land use controls, we're kind of switching gears now. So if public capital investments, if those big projects affect the demand for land and structures, land use controls are what's going to channel and shape the way that those demand forces play themselves out. And this is mostly done through different types of zoning. We're going to look at a couple other tools, but just we're not going to go too far into zoning because here at Dillard we have an entire land use policy class, but we're just going to kind of briefly get it into our heads about what zoning is, what it can do. Okay, so before we dive into zoning, like as a tool, we're talking land use regulation. We're talking about how we shape land, what we can do. So really, this has to do with the government saying what property owners can and cannot do with their land. That's kind of what we're talking about with land use regulation. So why? Like, why would the government get involved with saying what private property, like owners can do with their property? Um, there's many reasons. Prevent harm to other citizens, prevent damage to property, promote growth, sustainability, this kind of economic development planning. It's a method of improving cities and suburbs. You try and do this kind of city revitalization. Um, it's really, it's kind of like you start controlling the use of land, saying what you can and cannot build on certain areas of land is to prevent the undesirable and stimulate the beneficial. It's kind of like an overall goal. Um, and also, the government gets involved with regulating land because you need to achieve goals that the market can't, or we're talking about something that individuals can't deal with on their own. I mean, just think about the magnitude of these capital investment projects we talked about. I mean, these are too big. Like, individuals can't deal with these things on their own. So, just to give you an idea, when we say land use, I want you to know some different categories. I mean, basically, when you're talking about chopping a city up into pieces and saying what you can use the land for, these are going to be your categories. It can be residential, houses, it could be commercial. This is your businesses, your commercial activity, manufacturing, and mixed use. Mixed use is well, it's kind of like it sounds. It's a mix of uses. This is like I always envision the building that's got like the store on the bottom and the apartments on the top. So these are your basic categories of how to use land: residential, commercial, manufacturing, or a mixed use type development. So a couple other words that I want you to know, different land use categories, that these are terms that are used in urban planning, and I want you to know them so you can feel fancy. One is called green fields. Sorry, I always have to pause to take a drink. Green fields are, this is your green space, your undeveloped land. It's land that's used for agriculture. It's land that's left to evolve naturally. Your green fields. The other one is brown fields. This is land that was previously used for industrial purposes. This is like your contaminated land. This is your dirty, nasty, polluting factory that's not there anymore. So the spaces that are left behind are called brown fields. And then you have something called gray fields. This is economically underused land. Maybe it suffered from a lack of investment. It's an underused, like urban infill or commercial locations, but it's something that maybe has redevelopment or revitalization value. So green fields, brown fields, gray fields. Here's a picture of what some of those would look like. So on the left, you've got your brown field. This is this industrial site. It used to be kind of an industrial manufacturing site, and now it's kind of like this big contaminated area. In the top right-hand corner, that would be like a gray field. See how it's like a shopping plaza? Maybe it's underutilized, kind of suffering from disinvestment. I mean, you got a huge parking lot with no cars in it. That would be like a gray field. And then on the bottom is more of like a green field, where you've got the green spaces, kind of like the underdeveloped land or the undeveloped land. So those are just some of your examples. Okay, so zoning. And quickly, what is zoning? Essentially, what zoning means is you're assigning specific land uses to different sections of the city. You've got a map. It chops the city up into different zones, and they designate the regulations that apply to every lot and block within the city. So you get a map of the city, segmented into zones, say what you can and cannot do specifically in each zone. Just a little bit of history about zoning. So New York City enacted the first comprehensive zoning ordinance. Um, that says death, it should be dealt. I'm sorry. It dealt with land use and design. This is things like height, density, of buildings. We can talk about that in class, but it didn't really focus on environmental issues or social issues. It came about, why? Because really think of this like these powerful business leaders in New York City didn't want a factory built next to their fancy stores like Tiffany's. So that's kind of how zoning came about. Later, different regulations were added to include things that were thought to be in the public interest, like plazas, atriums, this parking, daycare, public spaces. And then more recently, we've started addressing population growth, city growth, cities in decline, and then environmental impact. So zoning ordinances, this is your best known form of land use control. The effectiveness of zoning ordinances, that's going to vary from one community to the next. Planners prepare it, and then local legislators give it legal force. So with a zoning ordinance, in New Orleans, it's the CZO, Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. The components are there's basically two components. One, you've got a map that divides the community into zones. And then two, you've got text that specifies what can and can't be constructed in each zone. Um, and then just some other controls before we go to the next video and actually look at some zoning, look at some comprehensive plans, just some other controls you could use to regulate land. It's called subdivision regulations. This is mostly for residential development, for your housing. It ensures that new developments meet community standards, this idea of subdivision regulations. There's something called a site plan review that applies to commercial and multifamily developments. A site plan review is performed. You could perform an architectural review. That's something that could be required. That means that building plans are reviewed for aesthetic consideration, like to look at what the architecture of the place looks like. And you mostly see this in older, upper income residential areas. You find this in your new planned developments, an architectural review. And then historic preservation. You see a lot of that here in New Orleans. Really, what historic preservation kind of means as far as land use regulation is that you designate a historic district and then control what happens in it. There's a lot of neighborhoods in New Orleans that are designated as historic districts, which means the government has a lot of control about what you can and can't do in those districts. This is why things like in the French Quarter, you're not going to see solar power, like solar panels on houses, because that goes against their kind of historic preservation rules. And that is it for now. Let's go on and actually look at some plans, look at some comprehensive zoning ordinances so you can get a better idea of what we mean.